Hi, Jonathan and Blaise. So excited to have you join me today and really looking forward to hearing you speak at our conference this year. The conference theme this year is humanizing healthcare, and neither of you are physicians, so you're looking at it from the other perspective, but wanted to ask your thoughts as to why you think that's an important perspective to consider.
Yeah, well, I mean, from the work that we do, talking to people about life issues like abortion and euthanasia, so much of that is making that human connection with other people, even if they're coming from a different perspective, having a different worldview and that sort of thing, right? Like we focus on finding common ground with people, showing empathy, like, building rapport in a conversation with someone about abortion. It's so much easier to change someone's mind and to make the case for the pro-life view when you've been able to make a human connection with them. And on the issue of euthanasia and assisted suicide as well, you can see how the sometimes dehumanizing, kind of over medicalized end of life care that many people get, puts pressure on people for euthanasia and assisted suicide. Like we have fantastic hospitals that do fantastic things to help people who are struggling at the end of life, but under the fluorescent lights in a sterilized hospital with limited visitors and stuff like that, like the more human we can be, the better we can care for people and alleviate some of that pressure for things like euthanasia and assisted suicides. That's what comes to my mind at first.
How about you, Jonathan?
Yeah, so I would second everything Blaise said, unsurprisingly, but also I would add that the way we talk about these issues has become fundamentally dehumanized. That the goal of the pro-life movement in many ways is to introduce people to the human we're talking about when we say reproductive health care, which is a term used to disguise the humanity of the preborn children who are killed during abortion. And it's also essential because it helps explain to the culture why there's such a thing as a pro-life physician to begin with. A pro-life physician is simply somebody who recognizes that there is another human patient involved during an abortion discussion or a discussion where somebody's seeking an abortion or an abortifacient. And so I think humanization is fundamental because so much standard medical language that we have no technical problem with is being used in a nefarious way. The same way terms like fetus, which refer to a human being at a certain point in their development, is used as a alternative to referring to them as a human being, even though that makes no sense etymologically. So I think it's really, really essential that humanization is the focus not only of physicians, but of the pro-life movement at large, because if we're not talking about human beings when we're talking about so-called reproductive health care or abortion, then this discussion really doesn't matter all that much, and it's a complex ethical issue with very little at stake.
Yeah, insofar as the culture of death dehumanizes the preborn children, our mission as pro-lifers is to rehumanize.
Okay, great. So both of you have been at this for a little while. And I just was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you developed this interest in doing abortion and euthanasia apologetics.
Sure. Well, yeah, I've been actively involved in the pro-life movement for 15 years since I hit first year university at the University of Toronto, and I got involved with U of T Students for Life, and I got connected to Toronto Right to Life and CCBR through there, and was volunteering for 10 years in the movement, more and more and more until I joined staff with CCBR 5 years ago. I think what attracted me to the educational activism that we do is CCBR's effectiveness in terms of being able to change hearts and minds on abortion, to show the truth and to communicate with science and human rights and persuade people. I remember when I was in first year, the first day that I came out to CCBR activism project that was happening at the University of Toronto, I was kind of nervous and didn't really know what to think. So I was just going to watch for the day. I didn't identify myself as a volunteer or anything. And I ended up skipping all my classes and just talking to people about abortion all day long because I could see the impact that it was having in reaching people. But before I even got to the University of Toronto, it was in high school and through my mom. In grade 10, I was assigned to the pro-life side of an abortion debate. And when I was doing research from that, I learned about the horror of abortion. I was kind of pro-life by default, but I didn't know much about it. And I talked to my mom, who is a physician, and she told me that she had faced 5 difficult pregnancies. She was pregnant with me when she was in medical school. She was 8 months pregnant when she got her degree. She had a couple miscarriages. With my sister, she was seriously in the hospital for a few weeks. It wasn't clear if she or my sister would make it through. And then with my younger brother, it was a high-risk pregnancy, and she was advised to have an abortion, and it was just unthinkable for her. So she went and found another physician who would help her through a high-risk pregnancy. So seeing her experience through difficult pregnancies and from her perspective, and then learning more about the issue, that inspired me to get involved. And then being connected with CCBR and seeing how effective the approach is inspired me to get involved in this kind of educational activism.
Yeah, to give you sort of the abbreviated version of what got me involved, because obviously considering what a strange job it is to do full time, the story is kind of complicated. I would boil it down actually to what we discussed previously about recognizing the humanity of the preborn. Because I would say that, like Blaise, I got brought up pro-life by default. But it was part of a list of things you agreed with because you were a Christian, not something you engaged with or thought about deeply or really fully understood. And it was when I was trying to figure out more about it and Googled abortion at university and watched an abortion video that I realized what I was watching was an actual human member of our society being brutally killed with the consent of the rest of the society and the facilitation and collaboration of the medical community. And that really, really did strike me, because I was going to university for history. That's what my degree is in. And I know what happens in societies where you medicalize the killing of human beings and justify them for various reasons. And one of the things I think that is really obvious about why someone should get involved in the pro-life movement is because if we're talking about a human being that's being killed, there really isn't anything more important that we're involved with, right? There are many different ethical issues, and I write about a lot of them for various publications, and I know that Blaise gives presentations on a variety of issues as well, but there's no issue more important than this one, because this issue involves human beings that are being actively victimized on a daily basis. And so really, to boil it all down, it was that realization and being confronted with that realization that drew me into the pro-life movement. And it's why I haven't been around quite as long as Blaise. It's 12 years for me. But it's why I have no intention of ever leaving this movement, because to be able to meet with people and talk about abortion with them, and to see in many instances them change their lives and change their hearts, change their minds, and then choose life. There is nothing more rewarding than that either. When that does happen, as we've been privileged and blessed to see, you realize that the impact of that ripples forward for generations, and that's an extraordinary feeling.
Awesome. So I think just moving off of that, or extending that conversation, what person or event had the biggest impact on where you are today? Start with you, Blaise.
Sure. It's hard to pick just one. I guess I remember when it comes to the abortion issue. Like Jonathan, it was seeing an abortion video when I was an undergrad. But in terms of, I think, inspiring me to make this a major focus in my life, it was CCBR's New Abortion Caravan in 2012, where a national tour from Vancouver to Ottawa, and I volunteered in Toronto and Ottawa and got involved. And I had seen people change their minds, and I had seen the effectiveness of reaching people with the truth about abortion after I was moved by the horror of abortion. But seeing a group of people go across the country with a plan to reach Canada with the truth inspired me to get involved on the issue. With euthanasia and assisted suicide, I could think of a couple speakers as well. Like I heard Alex Schattenberg from the Euthanasia Prevention Coalition in 2009 when we had him at the University of Toronto. And again, I was pro-life by default, but I didn't know much about euthanasia and assisted suicide, and just learning about the kind of discrimination that takes place, and the slippery slope in practice of what ostensibly starts as a right to die, but it ends up being offered to more and more people. that really captured my attention on the importance of the euthanasia and assisted suicide issue. And then over the years, we've worked on effective ways to talk about that and change people's minds on that issue as well. But Alex Schattenberg stands out as the first person who kind of brought the details of euthanasia and assisted suicide to my attention.
Yeah, for me, honestly, probably like the conversation that stands out to me is the reason I went from somebody who volunteered with pro-life organizations to somebody who seriously considered going into it full time was probably the first conversation I had on a university campus when I asked a girl, I think she was probably about 19, what she thought about abortion. And she told me she'd had one a couple of weeks ago. And she was looking at our display that was behind me. And she said, look, where were you guys then? If I had seen this, if I had talked to somebody like you, I wouldn't have made that choice. And now I have to sort of live with this lifelong regret that my baby died. And it was that combination of somebody needed to be there. And if we had been there, her baby would have been alive. Like, it wouldn't have just been a futile effort. It wouldn't have just been sort of the, Christian version of virtue signaling in public, letting everybody know that we were pro-life and that, like, I don't really see much of a point to doing that sort of thing, to be honest. I think the only good reason to do pro-life work is to actually save lives. But realizing that could be done, it was honestly those conversations. And then, of course, I was offered a job to help put together the national plan that Blaise referred to by Stephanie Gray and Jojo Ruba, who were then the co-founders of CCBR. And so, of course, I have to give them credit for offering me the job, because they were my path into the movement, and I still hold the same position I did 10 years ago at CCBR.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So just, I know we're running out of time, but I just wanted to wrap up by asking you both to tell us about your favorite book and why, and we'll give a copy away to somebody in the audience when you speak. So Blaise.
Again, hard to pick one. For me, I have to go Theology of the Body again. So in addition to pro-life work, I did a master's part-time in theological studies, and what attracted me to theology was John Paul II's Theology of the Body. And that does tie in with pro-life work in terms of the dignity of the person and respect for every human being. But John Paul II focuses on human sexuality and marriage, and that have to be my favorite book. And then Christopher West has a great way of making that theology accessible to people. So those are perhaps some shorter books rather than the big 600-page one. But between Christopher West and John Paul II, I'd have to pick that as my top one.
Okay, very good. How about you, Jonathan?
I have a different favorite every year. I'm like looking at the shelf where my reading for this year is so far, and it's an incredibly difficult question to answer. So I'll go with my favorite novel for 15 years. So that's a safe bet, is Uncle Tom's Cabin, which is also credited with raising awareness of the humanity of those who were enslaved in the American South. It's just as good now, I think, as when it came out. It stood the test of time, and it's a brilliant read. It really, anybody who hasn't read it absolutely should read that book. And enjoy is probably the wrong word for a work of fiction about that particular topic, but it really is, I think, inspiring in a lot of ways, and highlights the Christian worldview and what it means to humanize those who are being victimized by systematic oppression. And then I guess for the history of the pro-life movement, I would just offer two, because many people don't seem to understand that the pro-life movement has always been a broad tent. So there's Defenders of the Unborn by Dr. Daniel K. Williams, published by Oxford University Press. And he kind of talks about how the pro-life movement was actually begun by liberals. The conservatives didn't come into the issue till a little bit later. And it's just a phenomenal portrayal of how the movement started, and how all of these different theologies and philosophies combined to make the movement that we're in today. And then one other one, just because I really think everybody should read it and it hasn't got enough attention, would be Abortion Rights, RITES, A Social History of Abortion in America by Marvin Olasky. Who is now the editor-in-chief of World Magazine. But it's so good of the history of abortion in North America, its origins, its progression, and then he goes all the way up to the late 80s. That in almost every book I've read by an abortion activist, by an abortion supporter, they've cited his book in their bibliography, because so much of the work that he did was original. So both of those books, I think, are really important to understanding our movement, because pro-lifers often do a better job of understanding William Wilberforce and MLK and folks like that than we do at understanding the long and I think incredible history of our own movement.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And I really appreciate both of you joining me here today and really look forward to seeing you in October.
You bet, in person this time.
Yes, for sure. Okay, take care.